Last week, I discussed whether the price of housing in Israel had gone down, and if not, then when it's going to happen. Someone asked me in the comments a very important question. We're at the start of a global recession, which heavily impacts the high-tech industry. We have seen both corporate and startup high-tech companies start to size down and fire staff. Do you think that this will also have an impact due to people not being able to keep up their monthly payments? It's true that over the course of the summer, economists and politicians in the US debated whether or not we were in the start of a recession. And while decision makers in Israel were a bit more optimistic, some economists say that we are on the edge of a global recession, as we started to see with the tech sector. So I want to touch briefly on how a recession, if it were to happen, would affect the housing market in Israel. Firstly, while past results don't necessarily predict future trends, it's worth noting that during the Great Recession about 15 years ago, which affected the global economy in major ways, the Israeli market was much less affected, especially the housing market. But let's say for argument's sake that we are headed to somewhat of a recession. Let's look at some of the causes of that recession. To a certain extent, as I spoke about last time, many governments have been raising interest rates to try battling inflation and cooling down their economies. But if you cool down an economy too much, then that starts to look like a recession. One would hope that the relevant decision makers at the central banks can recognize when to pull back on their monetary policies before it goes too far. Then you have the war in Ukraine. This has affected the economy in general and the housing market more specifically in a number of different ways. Firstly, any major war causes disruptions in supply chains and results in uncertainty in the global markets. Then you have the cost of oil and energy, which has also gone up around the world. More acutely, Israel imports a lot of construction material from Russia and Ukraine. For instance, steel and iron, a lot of that comes from that region. So with the disruption of supply chains, the cost of the building has gone up faster than it has in a long time. And when the cost of materials goes up, then the cost of new apartments and houses goes up. And the market for secondhand apartments tends to follow the market for firsthand apartments as well. Another important factor is immigrants. There's been a big wave of aliyah and asylum seekers from Russia and Ukraine over the course of the war, primarily driving up the demand for rentals, but also purchases to a certain extent, and even luxury homes to an even smaller extent. I know personally in my experience, apartments that I've listed for rent in Netanya and Bat Yam and Airbnbs in Tel Aviv, almost every person who reached out over the past year were Russians or Ukrainians. So as long as the war keeps raging on, it's going to have a significant effect on the economy in general and the housing market in particular. Going back to the question that I was posed, as people are losing jobs, then to a certain extent that will definitely lower people's purchasing ability and will lower the demand for purchasing to whatever extent this continues, and it'll limit the spending power of people who are renting as well. But unlike the stock market or other commodities, it takes a long time for even major events to have a significant impact on the housing market, especially in Israel, where it's such a long, drawn-out process, as I've spoken about in previous episodes. Even at the height of Corona, I had a lot of people asking me for Corona deals where they could buy something cheap under market prices or someone was going to be desperate to sell. It didn't really happen on any large scale. There was maybe a few cases here and there where people, really needed to move and so they needed to sell so they could buy something else. But for the most part, banks were freezing mortgages, people were delaying their plans, and so there was less deals that were closed, but the deals that were closed weren't drastically less in price than what they had been before the pandemic. Most people were able to just hold off until there was a new normal. So to summarize, most importantly, I hope we see a more peaceful future in the Ukraine, and I hope that more people aren't getting laid off from their jobs. But even if that does continue to a certain extent, I don't see that impacting the price of housing, certainly for purchasing, anytime in the near future. In my next episode, I'll delve a little bit more into the rentals market and how that's been affected over the course of 2022 and give my predictions for 2023. Thanks so much for watching.